Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the TFTuesday Podcast again this week. My name is K-Libra, and today I'm going to be joined by a really old friend of mine that now goes by Enbyeon. Hey, Enbyeon, how you doing?
Hello. I think you've probably seen me through the most names of all online people I know, because I think I've gone through like five that you know of at this point.
Yeah, and I think most of them,
Yeah,
but
we're gonna keep them back in the closet. Nobody needs to know the secrets.
yeah. So we're not going to do that. So you can all have healthy questions of mystery and wonder. But yes, this is actually a very old buddy of mine that we haven't really been in touch. We haven't really been in touch for like several years, but like stayed in the periphery of, and thanks to ShifterCon, we actually just got to talking to each other again. So that was real good.
Yeah, I saw you on in one of the like chats during a panel, and I'm like, oh, like K-Libra's here. I should add him to my Discord friend list because I realized for some reason we never like added each other to Discord, even though we follow each other on most socials. I think.
Yeah, so I am just really happy to be able to talk with this guy again. Just great, and I also know them from some other really fun things that probably few people are aware of, like writing. I love this guy's writing, and yeah, so I'm just going to be excited to actually have him on as a guest to break the silence and also just bring something fun. And speaking of fun things, if you want this fun to continue, I'd like you to consider joining the Patreon, because the Patreon is something that helps keep this going. It encourages us to be able to focus more time and energy. And man, I mean, if you want little bonuses and stuff, yeah, I will post art there that doesn't really get out there, or it may not get out there until way later, or something like that. Early art from Zill and I. There are other artists that like to share their little bits and bobs there too. So there's that. There's little recording bits that sometimes do not make it to anything on YouTube or Spotify. But most of all, if you are supporting us, then we can keep this going for as long as we possibly can and just keep making stuff. This stuff takes time, it takes energy, and if we are supported, we can just more comfortably make this. So please consider that. But that getting out of the way, if you could better introduce yourself to our audience today.
Yes, hello. I'm Enbyeon. I'm a Serbian-born, Swedish-based game developer and streamer. I've been in the games industry for roughly 12 years. A decade of that as a game designer, and I've been streaming roughly since 2015. I've streamed on Hitbox.tv, which I don't think anybody even remembers right now.
I do.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Yeah. And also, after that collapsed in and of itself, I moved to Twitch. And I've been, at some capacity, a furry since the early 2000s. I kind of bumbled into transformation art first, and then I realized, oh wait, this is a subset of something else. Like, this is like the whole furry culture is something I learned out in the 2000s. I mean, kind of like lurking. I'm not particularly front facing or prevalent in the community. I've been putting myself a bit more out there this year and the past few years in general, but I've been mostly been like a lurker contributor.
Yeah, and it's been cool because, again, I got lucky when I started streaming and really putting myself out there, especially on FA, and I just kept streaming and streaming, and you kept coming up more and more. We ended up talking on the side, and yeah, it was just really good to talk to you on, outside of just the little art production spaces and everything like that. And, we also started to share other interests like writing and like a little, here and there, just talk about transformation. You see, it's funny because I make these friends and that's not what we talk about most of the time.
Yeah, I remember when you were streaming. I think I specifically remember you were like either you were taking ideas or we were talking about like weird underrepresented TF species back then. I think I mentioned rhino, and you were like, "Oh yeah, let's do a rhino." Like I remember that was like on the initial one of the initial streams I was on.
Yeah, and I remember the sketch that I made too. So
Yeah.
that was fun. Yeah, man, that was also a hard time when I was just doing all those streams that they would last like 8, 12, and yeah, I even have done like close to 24-hour streams where I would even stream at my job yeah, ask all the questions you want. Yes, I did. I streamed at my job, and then I would come home and stream some more, and yeah, it's just a ton of shit. And yeah, so with all that stuff, also came eventually the realization that both of us really love video games, and obviously, as was mentioned, Enbyeon is in game development. So we are going to be discussing transformation in video games again, but specifically, I was really interested to hear from a developer standpoint what, you know, like just what can work in a way that maybe I didn't think of. And it was supposed to be power ups and transformation mechanics, things like that, right? Or really
Yeah.
transformation as a power up. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like transformation mechanics. So this is a sort of a retelling, like I don't know, director's cut of a presentation I did at ShifterCon, where I
Ooh,
wanted to be
exclusive.
yeah exclusive. I wanted this to be a bit more free form, but basically I did a panel there that was transformation mechanics in games, and the breakdown that I did was transformations as a power up, as a toolbox, and as a punishment. There's also some other stuff after the fact that, like, I because I was thinking a bit more about this topic. There's also like sort of like transformation as progression in the game, where like the more you progress, the character changes further. That's something that felt understated, but there's also some other parts of game development that I didn't really talk about in detail because I kind of just presented people with like, hey, here are the things that exist. Here's the sort of like categorization I'm presenting, but I didn't really get into the nitty gritty of, why do you see these mechanics or why do you not see enough of them and why do they sometimes seem limited. So I think mostly we can like talk about that too, because I think it's like a very interesting topic.
All right, so take it away. What's the first point that you want to use to kind of set the stage for this whole topic?
So I think what I will start with is just saying that what I'm considering a transformation mechanic is just a mechanic that changes the player character from one shape into another. So something like character swapping wouldn't count. So if you know the old TMNT NES game where you swap between the four turtles, that wouldn't be transformation because you're just the contextualization is that you're switching characters. And I
Right.
wouldn't want to really count cosmetics. Like if you're playing Overwatch and then you get like a furry skin of Reaper, Reaper didn't transform into like a furry Anubis or something like that. That's just like a cosmetic. It doesn't have any mechanical influence on the game. So I mostly try to limit myself on stuff that actually affects gameplay.
Okay, good. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And that's kind of what I think a lot of people are hoping for when it comes to that sort of thing, which is why we tried to do an episode on it before and give our impressions of where is it most prominent or where is it at least the theme where people can really just kind of dig into the aspect of it as like an element of the world and stuff. And when it's just like, and when it's very like flatly cosmetic and it doesn't even affect how other characters interact with you, then it doesn't really feel like it counts, at least to me.
Yeah, because if it's just I think on PC gaming, for example, there's a lot of like mods for games where you can just go like, oh, I'm gonna swap my character to look like a werewolf. And I think in Oblivion, for example, there were no werewolves by default, unlike Morrowind or Skyrim. So people made some werewolf mods, but they weren't really in depth. It didn't feel like the world acknowledged that you were a werewolf. And I think a lot of the transformation fantasy isn't really just about the process of transformation. I think selling the fantasy is also kind of like having also the narrative framing around it. So sometimes that's why I feel it feels a little bit understated. But the other issue is that I think it's also a very expensive mechanic because back in the day, if you look at something like, say, Altered Beast, right? Like in Altered Beast, it's an '80s game. You have 2D sprites. Your character has very limited moves. Like he can jump, he can kick. He has like a few punches, a few kicks, and then you
Yep.
turn that into a new like beast form. So you turn into like a werewolf, and you turn into a dragon or something. And when you turn into those forms don't really have the same amount of animations as the human form. Like the human form, has like like so many like different martial arts moves, but then when you do the beast form, it's kind of just like no fireball and one special move, and that's it. And it's because somebody needs to make all these sprites. Somebody needs to draw and animate all of this. So it's like why I feel that transformation is one of the more expensive, like let's call them furry mechanics that you can make in a video game. Because if if you swap the form, say in a 3D game, is the form the same proportions as the human form, for example? Like, is the werewolf the same form? If it's the same form, does it look good enough? If it's not the same form, well, now you need to reanimate everything, so you need to put in more money and more time and more resources into bringing that to life. And then as graphical fidelity gets more and more intense, if you compare something like Altered Beast on arcades and then Altered Beast on the PS2, and if you were to make an Altered Beast now, you would need some weird fur tech and scaly tech, and it needs to work in more complicated physics environments probably than like a modern one does, unless you're doing sort of like throwback graphics. So it's just a very expensive expensive like mechanic, because it just kind of balloons more and more. There are some games where it's a bit more widespread what you can transform into. So, for example, you have Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. So that's sort of like a Wonder Boy series, like the latest entry in the Wonder Boy series. And that one is essentially you play as a little knight, and you can transform into 5 different forms by the end of the game. And those 5 different forms are roughly the same in what they can do. They might have some like unique features, like the snake, is kind of like a little morph ball. But overall, it's like you jump, you swing, and you have a unique mechanic. And there they can do all of these complicated mechanics, because it's very limited to what you can do in the game itself. You can jump and you can swing. Yeah. But if you were to do something like, let's say Mirror's Edge, for example. If you had a Mirror's Edge style parkour game and you added the ability to turn into a werewolf there, that would be a ton of more animation work, especially if the like scale of the character is different. Because then if you're making the scale of the character different, does this character jump farther? Can this character grab ledges from farther? So now you need to like have this knock-on effect of, do we need to make the distances different or the same? So that's why I think we don't really see it as much in depth, but we see it in like text games. In like there's a few text games like I don't know, Corruption of Champions. There's Flexible Survival. There's a lot of like text games on Edge as well that have transformation, because it's cheaper to bring that to life in text than it is with actual graphics, because it's faster to type that out and cheaper to type that out than actually draw it.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think of the little things that would make a transformation mechanic potentially disappointing in something that has a lot of graphical or like CPU power or whatever. If it's supposed to be a bigger game, then there would be the consideration of, should this character move any differently? Because the experience should be different moving around, even not just being able to jump higher or move faster, but what if you want them to accelerate differently or have a harder time stopping, or all kinds of little things. And it would all have to depend on the character and, considering the limitations and the logic, and does this make sense? And it's expensive, not just in cost, but I want people to understand that it takes so much energy in terms of just thinking about it and conceptualizing it and making it something satisfying for as many people as possible who are going to be playing the game, especially since if you're going to be swapping between, how much time do you want people to spend in each form? Would it be dissatisfying? Would people find it, to be dissatisfying or not worth it to be in one form or the other? Because then that could be a problem. Like, I feel like the very first Shantae had that problem, and it was fun. But once you could turn into a harpy, there was almost no reason to turn back into Shantae. It broke the game, because she could move everywhere, do a ton of damage, and the only things that she couldn't do were stuff that you'd have to just briefly get out of the form for, and then you just turn back into a harpy. And that kind of sucks, because you want all the stuff to matter in a lot of ways. And so there is a lot of really tough stuff to consider, especially what if you want to see the body change and go through whatever like distortions and stuff like that in whatever style. That is a huge artistic endeavor, and to execute it, from what little I've come to understand about games and any kind of media or special effects, it's something that you have to navigate very carefully so that you don't overwhelm yourself with all the technical things that could either be necessary or just make everything fall apart. It could be just exponentially difficult.
Yeah, and I think like the time we mentioned, like the how long it takes to transform into something. I think that's something that a lot of games realize that it might be cool the first time, but then the more you see it, the more you get tired of it. Because, for example, in Altered Beast for the PlayStation 2, so the 3D one, that one was only Europe and Japan, so it didn't get a US release. But that one, when you first transform into like a new form, when you unlock it, it has like a very lengthy, gory transformation. But when you transform into that form subsequent times, the transformation is like an abridged version. It's just like one of the little angles. Like instead of it focusing on the entire transformation, it's just like, oh, we're just gonna show the part where like your like arm turned into a paw because you've already seen this a dozen times. You don't want to see it like even more. And I think even when you look at stuff like say Bloody Roar. Bloody Roar is a really good one, and I think it's pretty popular among Transformation fans. For those who don't know, it's a 3D fighting game from the PS1 and the PS2 era, where characters turn into were creatures. But that one's almost a sort of like poof transformation because you're in a fighting game. You don't really, people already complain when a super move in a fighting game is longer than 3 seconds. They don't want to see everybody transform a bunch of times, but they kind of leverage that as well because they let you combo into a transformation too, so it kind of works out.
Yep. And like, I mean, I could argue that transformation in a fighting game is slightly more easy to balance because it just kind of, I kind of remember how certain characters have stance mechanics. Mm-hmm. You could technically make that other form as a stance, temporary or not, but that's getting into the weeds as something else. But yeah, it's true. You do diminish the impact and the enjoyment and the spectacle of it, if that's what you're going for, of people changing the same way every single time. Because making a unique, imagine trying to make a unique situation for each time you change. It would be fucking awesome, but oh man, that would never get finished. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I didn't know that about the PS2 Altered Beast that there would be abridged versions of the transformations, because that's what I noticed in the first game. Because for anybody who has played the first game more than a few times, you may remember that when you first see the werewolf, you can notice the frames of like the head like distorting and stuff like that, so you get like that kind of like crunchy sort of intense visceral changes sort of look to the head. But then after that, it's just blinking between the two.
Yeah.
Until it flicks into the next one. So you only get that once. And now, wow, I guess they followed their tradition because same sort of problem.
Yeah.
You can't just keep it up.
Yeah, I wonder if that was like a time or resource or memory limitation as well, because they probably assumed that most people would just see the first level in the first transformation, so that's where they hook you, but then they didn't do the other ones. Something that you touched upon that I also think is very interesting with transformation in games is like when you like have a form, like you mentioned the harpy form in Enchante, when you transform into that and you have that, you kind of don't need to use anything else. I do think that like transformation games or transformation mechanics in games, they don't really know what to do with them in a lot of cases once you've like gotten them. So like if we look at something like say, like even like a lot of text games where you can switch between like multiple forms, like let's go back to like Flexible Survival, which is like the post-apocalyptic TF game that has like God knows how many critters in it that you can transform into, but kind of when your character ends up transforming into that, that's kind of it. Like, okay, cool, I have this now, then there's nothing really much to build up on. And I think it's also kind of similar with say something like in like in Skyrim, like when you become a werewolf, then it just becomes like a thing of like, well, okay, now I turn into a werewolf like every night and every full moon, and once I finish the quest, there's nothing really there. It's just kind of like this thing that's there on the side, and there's nothing really for me to engage with it. Which is why I think that in a lot of cases, I think like the way it works best is when it's forcing you to switch back and forth, and it's when it's forcing you to switch between different forms, whether that's because your power-up expired or whether it's because it's like a Metroidvania game, like, the later Shantae games, or like, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, because like, oh well, you have to switch into this form because none of the other forms can engage with this mechanic, so we're forcing you to shift. They're kind of like always using them almost like, different abilities in Super Metroid. Like, oh, you always have to use the double jump at some point. You always have to like run ultra fast. You always have to turn into a morph ball. You never kind of like bypass that fully for most mechanics.
I like that, actually. That's a really good point, and it's one of the most memorable things that you can do with transformation. Because, like, okay, I thought of Beacon, and Beacon is really great. Because wait, have you heard of Beacon?
I have
Because
not.
I've talked about it before on the show. That's a roguelite. I'm going to explain it again. So if you listen to this show enough, too bad. Beacon is a roguelite where your character comes out of a cloning device. Okay, so it's a version of you that is going to try to escape, and you end up finding all these notes of the yous that didn't make it as you go along. But as you go along, you're collecting supplies and blah, 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 but you're also collecting DNA. So when you die, whatever DNA you collected, you can use it to enhance yourself, and it'll give you very direct information as to what kind of stat boosts and stuff they'll do. But what you won't be able to predict all the time is what it will change about your body, and it happens to give you these really descriptive transformations, like the experience of it, not just what it is, but the sensation of it becoming. It's almost like the body gets formed in the pod, and then the mutations happen, and you're aware of them. And it's really fucking cool. They don't just talk about how it feels or how it makes you feel or what it can make you do, but also like your perception, which can give it like a really horrific or just really a really surreal aspect. And that sort of thing makes you choose what are you going to possibly put up with so that you can try to make it out. And each time, even if you really like a form or an ability or a mutation or anything like that, you can't get it back, but you're going to keep trying, and it keeps it really interesting, especially since they wrote so many mutations. There's so many kinds in that game, and it's really cool. And yeah, if you are forced to either drop it or earn it or maintain it or try to get through it before it's over, it can really make you want it again. Or in some cases, you may fear losing it. And yeah, I think that's really good for an experience. So like the whole forcing aspect, I think that's, yeah, as somebody who really likes it to be willing, I think that makes a lot of sense for games.
Yeah, because eventually you'll just end up picking up, the best option once you know the game well enough, unless your alternatives play differently. Like when I play roguelikes, I usually gravitate towards whatever the like best option is for a run, but sometimes you just have no choice because you're not getting what you want, so you have to make do with what you're actually getting. And really, like transformation, like if you view it on a high level, it's really just abilities and let's even call them like weapons that have contextualization with that reflects on your character in a completely different way. Because if you have like, I don't know, let's say you have like really high damage reduction, whether you have high damage reduction because you found a piece of armor, or if you found a scroll that gives you mage armor, or whether you drank a potion that gave you scales, all those will mechanically achieve the same result, but really half of selling a transformation mechanic is the contextualization of it. And I think that's why probably the most prevalent genre is Metroidvania, is because it's just contextualizing your standard issue Metroidvania abilities with transformation.
Mm-hmm. And it's really cool also because there are a few games that you can find, and that's probably still a lot, but there's a number of games where you start to notice your character physically changing as part of the story and nothing else. And sometimes that also happens to line up with the change of abilities, so it kind of ends up going hand in hand implicitly, whether you realize it or not. Because, like, okay, a very mild one, and keep the opinions aside for a second, DMC Devil May Cry. As you progress, Dante's hair will slowly become whiter, if you notice, And one can interpret that as him actually getting in touch with the demon side that everybody knows he has. But also, you're gaining all these other abilities and weapons and talents, and it just kind of happens to play very well with the idea of you are becoming something more. And there are a few other games that do that, but it's hard to think of them. I think also of Returnal, which, as we've also talked about before, but really, as you go along in the game, the version of you that started versus the version of you that is fully equipped, prepared, has the skill ceiling and equipment floor raised a ton, looks really different. And that also goes into the personality and the story and everything like that, and like that whole narrative. I mean, even and you can argue with me, but it's visually at least in Sonic Frontiers, when Sonic is slowly getting more and more corrupted, later on in the game, it gets worse, and it looks like he's having a harder time standing up if he's just standing still. All that stuff is really cool, and yeah, it ties even more into just like forcing it on the player or making sure that it's something that the player can't control. They have to withstand it, and you're right also that players will optimize the fun out of a game. And you don't really want that if you're going to go through the trouble of making characters being able to change form.
Yeah, and I think because like again it gets like so expensive, you kind of see it in very minor ways in like modern AAA games, so to say. So like in DMC, you see it with the hair change. In Fable, I think it's something like you grow like horns and your character gets like a bit like more devilish, but it's still the same character.
Like the skin change and like I think the
Yeah.
eyes get weird. Yeah,
Yeah, but then people will go like, "Oh, well, why can't I turn into like a full demon?" It's like, well, if you turn into a full demon, then all the armor we made in the game that you can see when you equip won't fit because we don't have a good solution. So then we have to remove like how visible your armor is, which is what the Elder Scrolls solution is of, oh, you're a werewolf. Okay, well, you don't have armor while you're a werewolf because it can't fit. And even in games where your armor fits, quote unquote, like if you play Diablo 4 and you turn into a werebear or werewolf, your character doesn't have any of their cosmetics visible when they're a werebear or werewolf because that's twice as much, well, 3 times as much work because one character has 2 forms and it's already a lot of work to make all these items visually represented in your character. So that's why, like, usually, like, again, like what I said, like you won't see it as much or as detailed, or something will be missing. But when you do it in a way where you can kind of like fill in the gaps for players, it still works because then the player imagination kind of like contextualizes it. That's why, again, it might work for text games, but even if you have like lo-fi games, like they're 2D sprites or they're retro style, it's easier to get away with there because the player will, like, it's kind of like with horror games. It's much better in horror games when the player can't see the monsters clearly because what they imagine the monster is probably far scarier than what you can do graphically with your technology. Like, the player imagination is stronger than whatever high fidelity visuals you have.
yes. It's always really great when you could tap into somebody's imagination so that you can really get them into the experience that you want. I think the context is really going to be the strongest thing most of the time, but that's going to depend on how much you want the player to care about your story. And if you're going to include transformations in the story, then yeah, you have to really buckle down with some really important choices and then make them consistent in a bunch of ways. So it's still a lot of work, especially in a story. It's like easier in a game like and I finally remembered the name. It's a Super Nintendo game called Majual.
Oh, I know that one. The one where you start off as a human and you transform into different demons as you kill them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in order, and I didn't get to beat that game, but I played it. I tried to play it around at least a bit. It's kind of tough for me, but I know that in order to transform into a demon, you have to try. You have to, get the power ups. You have to get enough of the power ups, and then once it's done, next level, you're back to human. But if you don't do well enough, you can get by as just a human, but you'd be like, man, I wish I could be this demon thing so that I could get through easier.
My favorite thing about that game is that the worst ending, in terms of like tone, is if you beat the entire game as a human. And the best is if you like actually do all the demon transformations, so you turn into the ultimate demon at the end. Because that game, that's actually a really good example because it has like 3 endings, I think. So like, yeah, if you're just human, it's like the really bad ending. If you like also pick the same demon form over and over, you get like a really you get a bad ending. But if you want to get the best ending, then you basically have to go through each demon form, because then in the final level you get the ultimate demon form. So that one's like a very interesting way of encouraging you to actually pick like through all like the entire cast of forms. See, I forgot about that game when I was doing the panel, so that's a very good example.
I just thought that was really cool when I found out about it. Thank you, Sneshrunk. You know, watch that YouTube channel. That's how I found out about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, yes, games like that are really special to me, and they really make the whole prospect shine. And I mean, come on, man, even thematically, like encouraging you, like, come on, try every body, try every form, try every way you could possibly do something. It's very enticing for someone like me who doesn't like permanence in transformation. And I just want to keep experiencing it over and over, and I would want like my partners to also experience that. But I don't know. I guess next time you talk about this kind of subject, now you can bring up Module, because that is great to know that those kind of decisions also affect the ending.
Yeah, I think with the probably most popular example with like transformation in games, at least like with current audiences, is for my generation it was always Altered Beast, but I think for current generations of like, you know, for ATF enthusiasts, it's probably changed. I'm sure you're familiar with that one.
I have heard of it. I've seen a good chunk of it. It looks like this very strange thing that I feel is kind of meta in some ways.
I think that's probably like the RPG Maker vibes, because now whenever you see an RPG Maker game, you're kind of like, oh, is this trying to be like, you know, an Undertale? Is this trying to be meta? Even though Undertale is in Game Maker, it looks like an RPG Maker game.
No, that okay. No. Let me just explain. The reason I say it's kind of meta is because people complain about how hard it is, and I realize that a lot of the game overs have you turning into something.
Yeah,
and it makes me wonder if that's just fucking with the player's desire of, oops, I turned into this,
okay.
but you can't. But if it's that difficult, how it's so hard to avoid that you get the genuine experience of, oops, it looks like I turned into something else and I can't change back. And that's why I think it's meta. Not like playing with your brain or looking at your computer and saying, I have seen into your soul and I know what date you were born, I know what day you'll die. It's more like, oops, that this is what you wanted, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective. My perspective on it is really that it's sort of like a technically safe for work offshoot of a lot of adult games that have a similar format, because in a lot of adult games that are like RPG Maker format, they kind of give you those scenes when you are defeated or when you lose, like the adult scenes.
Yes.
Obviously, there's it's not just like rooted in that. I would say it's probably more rooted in something like Sierra point and click adventure games, where, you know, when you kind of almost intentionally die, you save your game and you die because you want to see the funny joke of how your character died. Like, oh, I wonder if this bear will eat me. Oh, I wonder what will happen if I jump off this cliff. But that obviously because people make, you know, adult versions of every like medium in existence, so we got like the adult versions of that as a failure state. And I think kind of change is just like more of that. It's kind of like we're giving you the transformation as a bad end, because one, it's easy to contextualize. Two, it's not really a mechanic. I kind of like when I mentioned it on the panel, but I did kind of clarify. It's not really like a mechanic, because mechanically speaking, what's happening in the game is you touched bad thing, game over, and then it's just that the game over has different visuals or audio. There's no like mechanic of, you know, oh, you get more corrupt over time, or you have to like, you know, scavenge for food, then you have to make sure that the food is purified. Like that would be more like, oh, this are like bad end avoidance mechanics. But this is more just like, oh, hey, cool transformation. which is fine, but that it's not a bad thing. It's just how that game decided to handle it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of neat. It does make me curious about actually playing the game and giving an honest review. And especially since people say it's really hard. When people okay, I don't care. Fuck it. I'll just be straight. I don't really trust when a lot of people say a game is difficult, because there's a lot of games that people say are incredibly hard that I'm just like, it's fine, or like, if you respect the game's demands, you'll do very well and you'll be challenged, but you could do just fine. It won't like fucking sear your soul to do it. And I just really wonder, like, in what ways is it difficult? Is it jank? Is it really just people not respecting the game when it tells you do not do this or be very mindful of that? That's what I wonder about it.
I don't think it's actually hard. We're now going like in more in review territory, but I don't think it's actually hard. I think it's just that you die a lot, but it's kind of like saying, "Oh, Super Meat Boy is hard because you die a lot in Super Meat Boy." I mean, I've beaten Super Meat Boy, but I don't keep count of how many times I've died because the game is built with the expectation that you will die a ton, and Change is kind of like that. I've beaten it. I didn't feel like I had a particularly hard time. I died a lot, but also the game is built around me dying a lot, so it's not like I'm surprised. It's kind of it's kind of like winning a match of, I don't know, Call of Duty, and you died like 5 times, but you still had the top kills. Like, you won, like, even though you died 5 times, because it's normal to get one shot in that game.
Yeah, exactly. So people's perception of difficulty is something I don't necessarily trust, and I think it's very interesting that you're somebody who's just like, yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. I play hard games all the time. I think it's fine.
Yeah, for me, hard is like super brain games, and I know that there are some that are popular and that are received very well. That if I were to sit down and be like, okay, this is not where I'm keyed into, but if I wanted to do it, well, it's time for me to learn, because that's what it is. And also, without going too much farther into this, I feel like that's why I was wondering if it was difficulty based on jank or player expectations. Sometimes player expectations can be exceedingly high, like in Scourgebringer. Mm-hmm. Scourgebringer also has a transformation tied to the story in a way, but it's a little spoilery, but it's there. But that game is one of the hardest games I've ever played.
That game is so
really
good.
Tough.
I love that game.
Yeah, it's really good.
That game is so good. I don't even care about, like, the transformation part of the story. That game is kind of like when you zone in and you manage to no-hit, like, take no damage in a room. It's just, like, the best feeling ever.
Yeah. For me, it was just having everything I needed to clear everything fast. I'm like, this is my gun, this is my move set, and this is what I'm gonna do. And it's just like bam, 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 just with amazing efficiency, and then reacting to variables that maybe, you had to do something a little different this time. Oh, it was so good. But yes, I know the transformation is secondary. I'm just bringing it up because this is what the show has in it. But yeah, that was more like, oh my god, that's all right. Again, I keep saying it to people. They're like, why isn't there more TF in media? It's fucking everywhere. Just watch things, play things, read things. You'll find it, and it'll be cool.
It's actually, that's a good segue, because one thing I wanted to mention is, like, we're talking about a lot of games that have transformation as a focus, but there are a lot of games that have transformation as a sort of side effect, because it's still a popular trope in media. Like, you can see them as a one-off thing. For example, in Zombies Ate My Neighbors, you have the potion that turns you into the big purple werewolf thing. I mean, that's like a horror game. It has werewolves as enemies, but that potion is more just somebody going, oh, gee whiz, wouldn't it be cool if you could transform into a monster? Because that sometimes happens in horror movies, but it's not the focus of the game. It's just one of a dozen power-ups you could find. And you can also, like, look at something like, one example I like to use for a power down was in Kid Icarus. The eggplant mage that can turn you into an eggplant. That's a power down. That's technically TF. I'm not sure who's really into eggplant TF. I'm not going to judge, but it is there. And that's more just like, a funny haha thing, because you see it, like you said, you see it in media, you see it everywhere. You see it in cartoons, in books, in movies. Like, if you have a long-running like kids show that's somewhat action oriented or like mystery oriented or whatever, somebody at some point is gonna transform into something. And then you also have things like you have JRPGs where sometimes it's the main character that transforms into something, like Breath of Fire, and that's like the gimmick. The character transforms into a dragon. And sometimes one of your party members just happens to transform into something. Like, for example, in Shining Force, you get like a character. I think in Shining Force 2, you get a character that's just like a dude that's kind of like more, has more hair, like has like a big beard, has like hair on his hands and whatnot. But then when you promote him to his next class, he becomes a werewolf. It's just like, yeah, that's just the thing that we have in this game.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Doesn't really get dug into is fucking Vincent from Final Fantasy VII. His whole shtick, his best stuff, is transforming into a variety of monsters, and that's not really mentioned or discussed, at least in the original game. And Dirge of Cerberus is not a game; it's a mistake. But yeah, you're walking around with this guy, and there's this huge world, and there's a lot of things that are acknowledged, and some fucked up stuff that's hinted at. But Vincent being an experiment, okay, fine. Or at least having been experimented on, okay, fine. But the fact that he changes into a bunch of different things, not really acknowledged or really built up on. Instead, they kind of leaned into the he has like some inhuman capabilities. He's really good with his big triple barrel gun, and I guess he can turn into a demonic looking thing with some powers, but they don't really fucking go into that. But that's a huge thing about him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in JRPGs which I think they just added for the heck of it without really thinking too much of the wider picture. I don't know if this is true for the later Mana games, but in like Sword of Mana or Secret of Mana, I can't remember which one was the first. But there's like a debuff you can get where your character like turns into a Moogle and they can't do anything while they're a Moogle until it expires. It's just like, wait, does this mean that all Moogles are cursed? Is this just a specific curse? Where did it come from? Nah, it's just like a funny little gag that we put in.
Yeah, and same for like Frog as well. Frog is in a bunch of Final Fantasies. Oh yeah, and speaking of like penalties, like fucking ghouls and ghosts and goblins, whichever one of those you want to go, that whole series. The fucking wizard that punishes you by turning you into a baby or a chicken, something like that.
I think it's one of them. It's a goose, I think.
I don't remember that one.
I think maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I played one of those homages that has you turn into a goose.
Oh wait, maybe it was like Maldita Castillo. Fuck, it was.
Oh, that one. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it is that one, but that is a very good game.
I didn't get the good ending for that game. It bothers me. Maybe I'll play it again sometime.
That developer loves making games where he's just like, oh, you continued twice? I guess you really don't want the best ending, huh?
Fuck you, man. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it can just pop up, and then you're right, it can just raise a ton of questions. Because now I'm thinking, yeah, they didn't talk about Vincent. Why can you still kind of defend yourself as a frog? Isn't that interesting? It's very interesting because you're not completely helpless. It's so weird.
Yeah, there are also some other like mainstream things that are sort of half and half in terms of transformation mechanics. I think Nintendo likes doing that a lot because honestly, like, poof, you transform into something is a pretty like easy mechanic to sell again. I think people don't realize how like mainstream the concept of transforming into something actually is in media. But like, and you have the Tanuki suits and all of that stuff in Mario games, which are more suits than actually transforming. But you have, you turn into an elephant in Mario Wonder. That's like a straight up elephant. It's not even like a suit. But you also have the Wario Land game. So Wario Land, that example I really like because it's a almost Metroidvania, but it doesn't really work like that because in Wario Land you have these isolated puzzle rooms, and then those isolated puzzle rooms will have a transformation that you can really only use in that room. So for example, you'll get bit by a bat, and then you turn into a bat, and you have the ability to fly, but if you touch any source of light, you go back to normal. So then all of a sudden you have to go through this room, avoiding all the light, so you can grab the key that you're trying to collect, and then you turn back and you just leave the room, and that's it. That's where it's localized. And it has a few
Yeah.
of those Looney Tunes transformations as well, where you get like crushed and then you turn into like an accordion or a spring and then you jump everywhere. But a lot of them are also just, you turn into a zombie, you turn into a bat, you turn into a vampire. It has a bunch of those too.
Yeah, and I love when a game is able to take something that seems only like a hindrance, only to point out that if you do this, this is what you can find, or this is what you can get that will benefit you later. I love that kind of shit. I think Order of Ecclesia has one. There's three. I'm pretty sure only three, because there's the succubus, there's the necromana, but then there's also the automaton. The automaton turns you into this stubby little robot that can't really do much of anything and walks extremely slowly, and you're like, why the fuck do I need this? And there is a certain part in the game where you just can't get across it, but that is the one thing that can traverse it. So you just patiently walk in one line across this otherwise impossible obstacle, and you get something really good. And that's if you stay open minded to how this could possibly help you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely like a lot of ways to play around it. And again, I think usually from my experience with game dev, everything that you try to do, you have to be like very clever about it. Because if you're not clever about it, it just balloons in scope and cost, and then you don't do it. Whether you're clever about how you're technically implementing it in terms of coding, or whether you're being clever in terms of how you are framing it to the player. And I do think that with mainstream games, it gets harder and harder to do these kind of mechanics because of just like the ballooning cost. Like if you wanted, and I'm gonna look silly if it turns out that in one of the new God of War games, Kratos does turn into some like werebear werewolf or whatever. But let's assume he doesn't. Like it would be very expensive. It would be very expensive for them to do that, because that game already has a ton of animation, super high fidelity looks, very controlled like pacing, very just a very like premium expensive game. And now you're adding, oh well, now we need to like add this, and it's just gonna like triple the cost of doing anything Kratos related. So
Yeah.
it's either gonna be bad, or it's going to be very limited, or it's going to be very non-interactive, or we're not going to do it. So in most cases, they don't do it. But for indie spaces, I think it's like something that's much easier to find. Or if you're doing something like a very retro vibes game, that's like, yeah, easier to sell.
Yeah, and even then, it's still something to consider. When you were talking about, for instance, like very premium games, Sonic All Stars Racing Transformed, that game has to do with your vehicle being able to go from land to water to air, and I think it's a great game, especially since one of the things it manages to do is that depending on the form you're in, you get a different feel of each kind of vehicle, and none of them feel bad, but each of them feel like the thing that they are supposed to be. Are you on a boat? Okay, how you turn and how you accelerate is going to feel different than when you're in a car. You can drift in all those things, which is at least good because you want some consistency. But if you feel like you're not very skilled in one of these areas, you're going to be asked to step up in that kind of skill. And that must have taken some fucking tweaking to actually get it right. Not just to make the vehicles change, but also just to make it so that each time you did it, it felt good, it felt appropriate, and also it didn't feel like you're just like, well, I'm in the sky now, but I move pretty much the same as a car. That would have been pretty dumb and disappointing. And you can apply that logic to a player character that turns from human, which most of us know what it's like to be a human being that can walk and do most things, to yes, we keep using a werewolf. Like what's going to be the difference in that? Are you going to really walk at the same speed and like stop in the same way? It's kind of not going to feel all that great sometimes.
Yeah, I think All Stars Race Transform is also a really good example, because I think when you talk about it, obviously, like from a player perspective of, oh, we have to make sure that all the vehicles feel good and they feel like what they are. That the for me, the always scary part as a game developer, that's like half the work. The other half the work is all the weird edge cases that you have to account for. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
if like we have like All Stars Racing Transform has some stages where the first part is you're on the ground, and then when you reach the final lap, it collapses, and then everybody flies in the air, and then you have to think about, well, it's gonna look good for the person who's in first or second or third place. What about the person in last place? You have to now account that the track has to fall apart seamlessly in every part because you can't predict where each player is going to be. Then you have the other things of, oh, well, this track branches out, one left is ground, right is water. So can you shoot the person like on the other thing? Like, does the weapon track there? How does that work? Or are they actually the same speed? Is one considered a shortcut, one considered a main path? And then they even have things like, oh, you can have a jump pad and you can turn it into a plane and you can fly above certain parts that are still on the ground for other players. So there's like so many edge cases when you do this, which it's always going to happen. If you have like any sort of like mechanic, you always have to wonder about the edge cases. But they managed to handle all of that. Like, that game did account for almost everything, but it also means that some tracks are just more higher budget than others. You have some tracks that don't have your vehicle transforming that much, or you don't have the track itself changing that much. Some tracks, there's the Skies of Arcadia track, which is probably the one of the
That
like
one's
better ones.
incredible. Holy shit. It's challenging, it's fancy, it's got so many places to go to. Oh,
yeah,
my God.
And then you have like some of the more straightforward tracks, which I can't remember offhand, that are mostly underground and maybe have like one little water segment.
Sky Sanctuary is a straightforward one. That one has you in a plane like for a lot of it, I think.
I think almost for all of it. It's been a while since I played the game, but yeah.
Yeah.
So the kind of like quality varied, but I also don't think it's like a bad thing because the Skies of Arcadia map is pretty overwhelming because it has so many like elements to it. So sometimes you just want the straightforward map. Like, I have that in Mario Kart all the time. Sometimes I just want to play Mario's default like Mushroom Cup track. I don't want to play Rainbow Road every time.
Yeah, actually, that's like, okay. I do not like Mario Kart 8, and when the cars transform and everything, I don't really feel a difference. The anti-gravity thing looks nifty until I wonder what's the difference, and the difference is when you bump off of somebody else, you give each other a boost. Why the fuck would you do that? But I'm like, I'm not really getting anything out of that, and that's why I like also Racing Transform so much, because like, even thematically, okay, like when you said that some of the tracks are more straightforward, where's the one that you're in a boat all the time? Burning Rangers. The whole stage is about like a flooding base that's on fire. Fine, fuck it. Your car's a boat for this whole time. I'm okay with it. I think most people are okay with it when they see it. They're like, ooh, a boat only level. That's how it can feel. Or like a flying mostly level, like the Afterburner one, like so the idea that you have to run off of the edge of an aircraft carrier to transform your car. So like, that works, and yeah, now it's like even greater appreciation for a game. And I also feel like that's what makes it really special and keeps people chasing that kind of high. Like, wow, I remember in this game when I got to turn into this or do that, and it was so cool, and I was able to do it, and it was like, really, really want more of it.
Yeah. Now, just talking about it makes me want to go like, oh, I should install it in Grammar Group again, because sometimes I like when that game has so many of my favorite characters, like in video games ever.
Seriously.
But one other trend that existed mostly in the PS2 and a bit in the PS3 era was the sort of rage mode transformation. There's so many examples of that at this point I can't even like think of them offhand. But it's basically your character has a super meter or a rage meter, whatever you want to call it, and then when the rage meter is full, you press a button or a combination of buttons, like usually like the shoulder buttons or like L3, R3, something like that. and you enter rage mode. In the least powerful example, it's usually your character is just glowing. So something like in God of War, your character will just glow, or in God Hand, your character will just glow and be like fast and vulnerable and do more damage. But then you have something like, I think, Jack and Daxter, maybe all of them, maybe only from 2 onwards, where like Jack turns into like Dark Jack, and he's like, oh, overwhelmed by like the evil power, but he's controlling it and kicking ass. But I'm trying to remember if there are probably examples of like rage mode just being like, oh, you transform into a thing temporarily, because
Double
those
trigger.
are, yeah, that's a good one.
I refer to, because my first exposure to that kind of thing, or at least the most notable one of it in a hack and slash game, was Devil May Cry 1. And so anytime I see a mode like that, I will describe it to my friends as Devil Trigger. And I think some other people would kind of get it if I say that, but yeah, like that's the Devil Trigger. And for people that don't know, Devil May Cry in the mainline series, you turn into a monster. You just flash and boom, you're like in this demon body. You can do everything that Dante can do, but faster, harder. And then in like Devil May Cry 3, some weapons could actually change or unlock a completely different thing you can only do in Devil Trigger. My favorite example of that is Navan, the electric guitar, because when you go Devil Trigger and you're using that weapon, you can now do these like spiraling like dashes in the air that can like go through enemies and do damage to them. You can also stay in the air and just fire lightning down upon them. You can't do that with any other weapon, but you turn into a demon and you have that guitar, you got this whole new shit that you can do, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and then like from a game dev perspective, to me, that when I see that transformation, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, they made him look basically the same, but they just put like demon armor skin on him effectively, because he needs to have the same moveset, he needs to like have the same relative size to everything, so this continues working. But also Devil May Cry already handles so well by default. I don't really know what you would. I think if they added something like a bigger like demon form that has like unique moves, that would probably not even feel as good as the base game.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not like Yakuza when it tried the different fighting styles thing. Yakuza 0 did that. And I think Kiwami 1 did that as well.
Yeah,
You ever
yeah.
play either of those?
I played Kiwami 1. I played a little bit of Zero, but the ones I've beaten from the brawler ones has been Kiwami 1.
Yeah, that one had like the fighting style
Yeah,
swap, right?
yeah.
Yeah, they first did that in 0, and then when I saw it carried over, I'm like, okay, cool. And from a story perspective, that really works. But I did like that. Again, it's like stances in fighting games. It changes your pacing. It changes your wind-up. It changes how much or little or how you have to navigate. And I think that's also a really good template for it. It's a really good example of, if you want your characters to change forms entirely, what do you need to consider? I think at the very least, if you look at those games, you can get a pretty good idea of how to navigate it. After that, it's a matter of presentation and what you think is worth putting the time and effort into actually showing the player.
I think if you took the approach of, oh, I'm making this like brawler and the character transforms into something, but the transformations are literally just stances. So like the bear form is sumo, the like I don't know, the wolf form is Krav Maga, the tiger form is karate or something like that. That's actually like very usable. A lot of these mechanics, like I said, like it's the Metroidvania logic of, oh, instead of it being a power up item, it is a form that you shapeshift into, or some, maybe when you double jump, your legs turn into like, I don't know, like frog legs or something like that. But you can just apply this as just contextualization to any mechanic that changes how your character handles, and you're now selling a new fantasy. If you have Yakuza where you change stances, that fantasy is, oh, this is a brawler Yakuza guy that knows different forms of fighting, and he is now just like using this fighting style to deal with these punks. But if you just change that to, oh well, this form happens to also have a contextualized like physical form to it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh okay, well when he's in bear form, all of these moves are kind of inspired by sumo wrestling because bears are big and bulky, but now you're selling a completely different fantasy.
Yeah, and then you could do cool little modifications as to what a bear could do that a human never would, and
Exactly.
you could make really stylish decisions and fun things and big payoffs.
Yeah.
Which, like, okay, I wonder, and I gotta ask you, how? Okay, like, I know it always depends, but do you sometimes really? Do you sometimes really desire to see like the physical changes, any of the process and stuff like that? I know I do, of course. I don't expect anybody to do it a ton, but like, do you have any like big desire for that at all?
Um, I think it's like I like transformation sequences. I'm a big fan of those, but I also feel like um I'm trying to like get more into the like post transformation framing and stuff, like the like long form transformation process. For example, when you have sometimes people do a sequence that's just like, oh, this happened in the span of like a minute, but sometimes you have people that are like, oh, this is a gradual transformation over the course of multiple days or months, and then you see for each step like day 1, day 50, day 30. So I like seeing that process, and I've kind of been like wanting to also see just more like, hey, what happens after that? Is this some implication of like, is this person just like a werewolf now or a wolf person now, or are they like living somewhere else? Are they going back on their regular life, but now they need to get new clothes? Like, what's going on? I think like that part is interesting to me.
Okay, so again, the longtime listeners are probably going to be chuckling, like, ah ha ha, what are you going to say now, Libra? Because I have a bone to pick with a lot of people who are just like extremely focused on what happens after.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering how I feel about this, these are games, and the story and what happens after actually matters a ton. And if you don't consider that, then you're probably going to be missing something. Yes, indeed, what happens after you turn into the monster or whatever, or if you're just like one of the enemies, if you're not going to give me an answer, if there's not going to be a consequence to that, I'm going to be disappointed. That's not really good. This is a tangent, but just to let you people know, the reason that I get upset about the post TF thing or I get irked by it is because when we're just like kind of drawing shit, or if it's just like a single image, or if it's a sequence, and people just kind of ache and agonize, or just like, oh, I wish they would give me more. Well, fucking, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that for you. Didn't we say at the beginning that things kind of balloon when you want to like do something like
Exactly.
that? Like if you, yeah, like if you already want to tell a story, then you can do that, and you can do that without the transformation in a lot of cases. Ooh, but we're not. But yeah, in this case, it is one of the most relevant instances to actually know what the fuck happens after. It's okay. Twilight Princess. I don't like that game. I did appreciate that being a wolf meant that there were so many places you could not go, and you had to navigate a very specific way. I'm like, that makes sense. That's actually kind of neat. It's not just the way you fight. It's not just the way you explore. It's where you can go. And that's really cool, too. And that has to do with, like, well, what happens after you're able to turn into a wolf and you're stuck like that for, like, these portions of the game? Well, here's your answer. How do you feel about it? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that that's like unusual to have different attitudes to different components based on the medium. Like I like a good narrative, and I I did writing. I enjoy a good story, but I will play sometimes games where, I go into it and the game is trying to sell me on, say, hey, this is a action-packed combat experience. And I'm like, okay, you're trying to sell me on an action-packed combat experience, and then the game talks my head off. Like, here's the story, here's our world, here's what we built. I'm like, dude, I don't care. You told me that we were gonna like be focusing on fighting, and now we're like literally the first like half an hour there's like barely any fighting. So it's kind of like how you use stuff. So you can like appreciate post TF in the contexts that make sense or that you enjoy. That I don't think that's like weird to like be like, oh, like, you know, if I commissioned, you know, art, I would probably be more inclined to do the actual like process rather than post TF. But I do sometimes, like, depending on what it is, like to see, you know, oh, I want to see the post TF, I want to see what happens after this, especially when it's like more, you know, identity affirming sequences. I think it's always satisfying to see it there.
Yeah, that's the theme. That's the aim, though. Like I said, it's specifically when I or certain people have made things, and that's their initial reaction is what happens after, because it makes me feel like they just kind of glossed over what it is you're being given in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, please do not do that. The aftermath of all this stuff is expressed in so many ways, in so many stories. I argue that it's everywhere, while people say it's not. Like, there isn't enough of it. Yes, there is. It's in all media. It's just not framed through the lens that you may recognize as TF, but it really fucking is. So yeah, I just wanted to be like super clear about that for people who are listening and recognize that I got that I'm being destroyed by this, that think that I'm going to roll my eyes at this. No, I think what's been made clear is I am shortchanged in media because people don't want to make processes because they're so expensive. Why don't they just show everything on screen? I want it at all the angles, and I want different situations for them. And those people are also annoying in their own right. Just to let you know.
I think like even some of the best sequences like don't even like show you all the details and everything. Like my one of my favorite sequences in movies at least is an American Werewolf, which kind of like American Werewolf in London, and where it like does focus on like a lot of the parts, but you don't like see like the entire construction because obviously from a practical standpoint that's not the prop they made, but also you still kind of fill in the gaps and you get the same, you know, sensation from it. Like you get the same experience of, oh shit, this person's turning into like a horrible monster animal.
Yeah, and that's fine. Okay, it's a matter of what you want to show, and this has also been a point that's brought up. What is the point of showing all this? And for American Werewolf in London, it is the horror, the agony. It's supposed to be, you know, it's supposed to be a painful, jarring experience. You see bones and muscle and everything being pushed in ways that, you know, we're not supposed to. Oh yeah, hot, horny, you know, blah blah blah. But like, take yourself out of that for like 1 fucking second and realize that like that's supposed to be the horror experience. They want to show that to you, and like if your face is breaking and that's what you're feeling, then yeah, that sucks, and you kind of don't want it. And they really framed it that way, and that was the point of showing it. I also think that generally, well, not generally, practically speaking, it is impossible to show everything at every single angle all at once anyway. So really take your shots. If you want to have like somebody writhing around in the center of the screen, like transforming into something, then that's your aim. You're not going to see everything anyway, and no one should try to do that. That being said, it's something that is kind of uncommon to see in a lot of games. Actually, not even common. It's pretty fucking rare, which is why I think that I also think of Ill. Have you heard of Ill?
Yes.
Yeah, like part of their ambition is having these models that can go these detailed, horrific transformations in real time. As you're playing the game, you can watch this full model transform from like any angle, and they'll be doing that. That is a hell of a venture, and it looks like they really want to be able to deliver a certain kind of experience, but that's their choice, you know? I think that's really cool, but there has to be like the aim for it. There has to be the intent. Just to put it in there, it's not really necessary. Vicar or Vicar, I'm still not sure which one of those pronunciations is correct. I just like the way Vicar sounds. Vicar Amelia, her transformation scene, I really like. You don't get to see it. You see the shadow distort. But I love how they do it. And then to cut back to what she's become, I'm like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah, no, that one's also very, very good. I think Bloodborne is very interesting example in like sort of like narrative progression of transforming, because it's more focused on the world around you transforming rather than necessarily you. Although like as a player you still get the progression of like the more insight you have, the more you actually, get to peer behind the curtain what's actually going on. That one actually like does it really well, but it's all very thematic and very gradual, and it's not something that you necessarily, you don't see the enemies that you're fighting, you don't see them like necessarily transform real time. You mostly, there's like a few examples, but most of them are just, oh, at the start it's kind of like these like really mad like villagers or citizens. Oh, now they're kind of like a bit more feral and have rabies, like almost 28 days later style, but like they can use weapons. Oh, now they're just like straight up like, werewolf monsters almost. And
Yeah,
then
exactly.
and then it's like, then it goes into the big plot twist of which apps. This is one of my favorite ones, where it's like, oh, you thought this was a monster hunting werewolf game, one hell singing? Haha, actually it's more Lovecraftian.
Yeah, it's cosmic fucking horror. Everything was bigger. This is all born from the hubris of humans who thought they could just do shit and not really think about it. It's like, oh, this seems nice.
Yeah, and that's also like a really good one, because your character doesn't like I'm trying to remember now. There's like some uh things you can wear that kind of affect the appearance of your character a bit. Like the claws in the DLC, I think, affect the appearance of your characters a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But
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 I think like most of it is just like at the heart of like some of the themes is the transformation, in the sense of everything around you is changing. You're slowly changing in terms of like how much you know. Enemies are changing. The world is changing. It's kind of like has transformation at its core without having, TF transformation. Furry TF transformation in that sense.
yeah, or just like the horror on-screen stuff, like
Yeah,
American Werewolf, which is the
yeah,
kind of thing that I know lots of people want, and I'd like more things like that too. But like, here's where I'm going to start just gushing over the game again, which I can do like over and over and over anyway. The First of all, the themes. It's not just the themes; it's the navigation of it. Beasthood is implied, and it is supposed to show like these are the first steps. You start perceiving the world differently, and then perception becomes like a huge. And then perception becomes like a huge theme. So then you're like, oh, okay, so is this really just in my imagination? But it's not. You can't deny what you're experiencing, can you? But then there's like dreams and nightmares, and then also you see, yes, like you mentioned, you notice that there are these villagers, and there are different states of change, and as you go on, you find like more horrific things. You can also detect former humanity in some of the things. I've talked about this before, but have you noticed that the rats still have like vague bits of humanity left in them? They were people.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, giant rats were people. And then it's like beasthood. Is it all in your head? And then you notice that there was like the claw weapon, which isn't really like a change, but it's like, oh, it does something. But even more goes into the gameplay. It goes into the themes. It goes into like everything. I think everything really is great about that game when it coalesces into one of two things, which is, first of all, if you find the weapon and the rune, you can become one of those wolf monsters, and you will play like one, and you will have a different move set, and you will have exclusive things. You won't even stand the same, you know. You can like do these this leaping lunging attack, all this kind of stuff that you cannot do as a human. There's some familiar bits, but you're obviously different. And then there's the other one where you don't just turn into a beast, but you turn into one of these cosmic horrors,
Yeah.
and you don't even have arms or weapons anymore. You have these tentacles that just wildly flail, and you have like this new magical ability, and there you go. You can actually do the thing in the game, which is just the entire scenario, the culmination of everything. People seeking power to overcome something, and then you seek that power too, and you use it, and this is the consequence. And that's fucking awesome. And that's all of it, inside and out. Transformation, the human condition. It's really cerebral and it's really fucking literal. And God, it's game of the year every year.
It's such a good game. But yeah, I think that's a. I didn't like until we started talking about it now. I was like, oh yeah, that technically, in some like very like weird ways, does count as like a TF centric game, but not like in the way where you would sell it to like maybe fans of the genre, because it's much more. It's much more like high level in the sense of like when you would have like a transformative journey, a transformative progression of plot. Like it's not just like about transformation in the literal sense it happens in the game's plot, but it's like also just like the theming of it is very strong. Which
everything about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, which like for example, you wouldn't like really see. Let's say if we look at like Altered Beast, like any of the Altered Beasts, like there you turn into a beast and you get a power up and you kick butt and that's it. But it doesn't really explore any of the themes of does this have any cost on your humanity? Why are you even turning into a beast? Why is that like necessary? There's no like actual framing of it. It's just like, oh well, you're powered up and it's cool. So it's very nice to see something like Bloodborne where the theming of it is actually so strong and actually like impactful.
Yeah, and that's really cool when you can have that play out in the story and what kind of ending you get, and then in how you play it, it's absolutely perfect. And I think that again, it was just part of the intent. And you do get like a tiny touch of the visceral stuff. And I know, again, people may be disappointed that Amelia didn't change on screen really, but that is an example that you get a very clear idea of what happens to people when they finally cross that line into beasthood. And you can think about it all you want, but you get the point. Mission accomplished in like every fucking level.
I mean, I think most people don't even like. If you're asking, a regular person, just like a regular like casual gamer who got to that point, and it's just like, oh yeah, do you remember the Vicar Amelia transformation? They'd be like, oh yeah, that was really messed up. But like they don't really care that the parts, certain parts weren't focused on because the intent, the feeling, their imagination filled up all of that. And that's usually how most people, consume media. I feel like when I was younger, the only time I would get disappointed when watching a werewolf movie and be like, okay, this is a werewolf movie, I want to watch it, and then it turns out, oh, it's actually not a werewolf. That was just, a rumor. It's actually just a regular dude. It's Old Man Jenkins. There wasn't even a wolf in the movie. Or if it's something...
your old Scooby-Doo type shit.
Yeah, or...
Which is also bullshit, because like, oh god, it gets me so angry. How did you manage to do all the werewolf shit just in a fucking costume? You weren't even moving like a human. Fuck out of here.
And
you like open your maw and you roar, like get out of here.
And there's one of the Howling movies, I can't remember which one, that's like a murder mystery plot in an old castle where, the murder mystery is who is a werewolf killing everybody. But because it's a murder mystery, and I guess because they had a lower budget, you never actually see a werewolf in the entire movie, like at any point. It's just like always off screen in the dark. And it's just very disappointing. And then we got Van Helsing, where we saw the werewolf in full CG. So I guess like that made up for, I don't know, a few decades of movie history.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But you know what? Like, is there anything that we've missed so far that you've wanted to tell people about when it comes to, power-ups and everything and the mechanic and inclusion of it in games? Because I know we've been just talking about so many games and media, but like... I don't know. This is another reason that I'm glad to talk to you, because so far you have brought up, things about it that I never considered in games. So I always feel like I'm missing something.
I'd say the last one that I didn't really intentionally mention on the panel because it was also like a really big example. It's stuff like Monster Collection games, like Pokemon and stuff. That has transformation kind of baked into the actual like a game, because you're raising these monsters, and whether it's Pokemon or Digimon or one of the other offshoots, it's kind of like, oh, it starts off as sort of like a lower level monster, and then as you train it, it becomes something like larger, Like, it doesn't just become like, oh, here's a wolf that becomes a big wolf. No, this wolf now has a gun and jeans, in Digimon. Um, so, so those are also like really big ones. I don't know if people actually view them as TF games, but it is like a transformation mechanic, and it kind of reflects the progress of the creature that you are raising.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to bring up because, especially, you have to wonder what exactly is in the theming and everything of it. So, like for Pokemon, they call it evolution, but it looks like them growing up more than like I don't know. I get it, but it kind of blurs the line as to like
Yeah.
what exactly is happening, especially since it appears as if with time they could just grow into that. Many things that exist now can go through really drastic changes from their birth all the way into adulthood. So that's kind of what it looks like, but then it happens in like a big burst. So it's not growth, but it's not considered a transformation. It's very strange. It's like even frogs can have, like, they have just such a drastic life cycle, but they also just kind of like gradually go into it. And Pokemon don't do that.
Yeah, I'd say probably Digimon is a bit clearer because Digimon evolution branches aren't like self-contained like Pokemon. Like in Pokemon, a Charmander will always end up a Charizard, and nothing else will turn into a Charizard. But in Digimon, multiple things can turn into a Weregarurumon or a Wargreymon because of just the way how the branching of the Digivolutions like overlap. So that one becomes more of a drastic transformation because you have this little like I don't know little dinosaur that then in the next stage of their life turns into a tank.
Yeah. I forgot what the meme was. It was like cute kitty cat, and then like the next step is refrigerator with a Gatling gun, something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty accurate. I was actually doing on my stream a few months back. I was doing a tier list of all the Digimon Digivolutions from the TV shows, and we were looking at them and going like, "What the hell is this thing? This doesn't even look like something. It just looks like a random thing with spikes and a gun."
Yeah, I feel like what I feel is a bit closer to that is in some of the Shin Megami Tensei
Mm-hmm.
games.
Yeah.
Those feel like transformations in like that's a little closer because their changes can be more drastic and yet they can somehow look related at times. But it's made very clear that a moment ago they were this thing and now they're this and now they're drastically different. So the theme of transformation is really in there. It's not really growth. You have because they could stay that way, but you were the reason. You're the catalyst for why they are now completely different.
Yeah, I think I haven't played too many of the Shin Megami Tensei games. I kind of only observed them from afar, but I think it's also an easy thing to tie into themes of like demons and corruptions as well, because it's just kind of like the demons like it's just kind of like a theme where you have like this sort of like the more you spend time with demons, the more it also like changes you. So like having the more you get corrupt, the more you like fall down the deep end. So having that like having transformation as a theme in a game that revolves around devils and demon summoning and just those outwardly abyssal things makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Also, like I don't know, maybe I could talk about this in a later episode, but corruption is a very it's it's a topic that I feel gets wrapped up in like really typical things, and it kind of raises the question of what it means to be corrupted, because corruption is kind of cultural when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think about that when it comes to stuff like the whole demonic corruption thing. Because, like, when with Majol, you're not turning into a demon for power. You're doing it to save the fucking day and your family. And from what little I understand, and I guess I don't remember how it ends really, but like you kind of fucking just save the day, whether or not you're giving your humanity away to like change your body to do these things. Doesn't really change who you are, but you can argue it's a corruption. but like it doesn't always have to be. It's
Yeah.
it's a really conditional thing.
I like the topic because it either there's so many ways to tackle it because you can go with, oh, this person was always like this and this just brought out their worst, or oh, this is an outside influence and this person would never act this way, or it could be just, this person cannot process their new form or shape and their reactions and their changes in behavior are correlated with that shape. So there's like a lot of ways to like tackle it other than just like, oh, now you're evil, now you're corrupted, you touched a bad thing that turned you into a bad beast thing.
Yeah, it's all seeping into you all the time because you keep drinking the water or eating the food or something like that.
Yeah.
Corruption of champions, the literal extent of like playing with that fucking thing, man. But yeah. Anything else that we're missing, by the way? Anything else that didn't get to make it into the panel, or that you were just kind of mulling over? We still got some time if you have some energy.
Well, I mostly just want to, I guess, like just to mention the categories that I mentioned at the beginning because we were kind of free-balling it while we were talking. So maybe people kind of forgot that, like, oh wait, you mentioned there were like 3 or 4 categories. So essentially, the transformation is a power-up thing, which is, oh, that's something that's like a clear benefit to you. It makes you stronger, even if it comes with certain limitations. Like, oh, now you can't talk to player characters, for example, because you don't have the ability to speak, but also you're super powered in combat. So that's something that would be like akin to Altered Beast. And then when we talked about Shantae or Monster Boy in the Cursed Kingdom or just Metroidvanias in general, that's more the toolbox variant. So that's where like each form gives you different tools to overcome obstacles, and you're kind of constantly switching between them. And then as punishment, that's more along the lines of, changed, or the Kid Icarus example I mentioned where you turn into an eggplant. Anything that's considered like, oh, this is bad, you need to fix it or the game is over. And then the category I didn't mention in the panel, which is like transformation as progression. I would say, like, in a literal sense, it would probably be monster raising games, because as you progress, the character transforms further. I think the game you mentioned, Beacon, would be a good example of like progression. And then if you wanted to go high level theming in terms of narrative progression rather than just mechanical or like ability progression, that would be something like Bloodborne.
Yeah. Okay. And it's funny because we did kind of like roll over those topics without really clarifying the the themes. Did we, or like, is there something else that you wanted to like add? Or
No, I think we covered most of it, because this is honestly what I like when I talk about these kind of things. I like it to be a springboard for other people to start thinking about game examples they know, or like ways to handle certain things, because I think it's more valuable. I could obviously sit here all day and cover as many examples as I can think of, but really for me it's always when I present a topic like this, I want people to have a sort of like frame of it and go like, oh, okay, well, I know what we're talking about now. What about this game? Would you consider this game? Oh, maybe you should rethink, like, maybe it's not 4 categories, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3. I like to start this to be a conversation starter, so I hope that people's takeaway from this is just thinking about not just, oh, what other examples can I think of, but also, oh, if I did, a game mechanic, because I'm an aspiring like game designer, for example, what would I do? What would I make? How would I frame it? What are the knock-on effects? That's kind of like what I usually want out of these kind of talks. So I don't think I need to cover anything else. I think we were pretty thorough with a lot of them.
okay, that's fucking awesome, man. It's been great just going over these things, but we are not quite done yet. We do have a couple of audience questions that I want to bounce between us. The first one that I can see here is from Other Side, and I'm just picking this one because I don't think this one's been asked before. Do you have a favorite pre-TF part in a TF story? It says, and in parentheses it says there was a lot of discussions about TF and post-TF, what happens after, but not pre-TF, what happens before.
I kind of like the part of just framing where it's happening, in the sense of, when you go, there's one sequence I remember when, like, for example, somebody went to a spooky potion shop that they didn't think worked, and then the shopkeeper was creepy, and they insulted the shopkeeper, and then the shopkeeper gave them, a TF potion as punishment, and then that's what they bought instead of what they actually wanted to buy. I like that kind of stuff, like when I kind of get context of like, oh, why is this happening to the person? But that's really also the only pre-TF thing that I can't think of, because other than that, what are you gonna really show?
Okay. All right. I have to give the not favorite answer, because the favorite answer would actually be an incredibly huge spoiler for something that some people are aware of. So I can't say that. The more obscure one that I can give has to do with a story from a short story anthology in the Dragonlance series called Dragons of Krynn, and it was just this. I think it was like a gnome or something, one of these like tinier kinds of people who was just fucking around in a magic shop. Haha. Messed around with like I think a book or something, got turned into a dragon, and had to go through like the considerations of what the hell is their life going to be now. They're terrified. They're like scared. They're confused, and I think I like that one specifically isn't because like they even turned into a dragon or they discussed it. I just remember how this character was nobody with ill intent, wasn't trying to be mischievous. The curiosity wasn't based in any kind of veiled desire. It was simply, oops, I just didn't know. And I like that they also ultimately were not punished for their sheer curiosity, because that would be kind of bleak. But I don't know, it just felt better that they were able to survive the experience, and it was exciting because I didn't want this character to get stuck that way or to be killed as a dragon, because in this world you may be dragon, you may be powerful, but one day you might get slaughtered, or some other dragon might come along and fuck your day up. So that's one of the ones that I really like, where the simple baseline of curiosity just was the reason this happened. Pure accidents, not karmic, not cosmic, not meant to teach you a lesson. And I think that's kind of a setup that really is not used anymore. I know it's a great storytelling device, but sometimes just shit happens. That's a story device that I think it's overlooked, and especially with this, like, oh my god, one day.
Oh no, yeah, I mean I agree. I do think it's I think it's underutilized, because I think in general nowadays we consider that a lot of things need to have purpose in media. Like, you need to have a reason why things are happening. Like, my least favorite example is you always need to have a reason why the villain is bad, which sometimes I like, but sometimes I just want Mike Myers from Halloween to just be evil. Like, he doesn't need a reason to be evil. He was just came into the world evil. But there's so much like stuff of like, no, we want this because we need to like be discussing about it. So that's why I think there's less of what you say, which is like, oh, sometimes something just happens. Like, there's no like good reason for it. It just happens because I don't think people like it nowadays. Even though I think it's not inherently bad.
I think it came from being inspired by influential media like the Milestone stuff, the cultural zeitgeist shit, that made you think, wow, I didn't think things could be so complicated in such a situation. And that can be really spellbinding. It can be great to go through the moral gray zones and all that stuff. But yeah, there is a value in a story of just explaining what happens, taking people through this experience, and some of these important things just being like, yeah, that's just the way it is. It doesn't matter how they got there. The fact is, like, can you believe how fucked up this is, or how cool this is? Because if you try to explain it, you're almost always going to be disappointed, or you won't fucking believe it. Ah, bullshit. Like, where's the satisfaction really going to come from?
Yeah.
Like, I think a good example of that is like, okay, people love the Joker. I'm glad they have played around with the idea of how he became this way, but like, if you really gave like a single explanation, that's gonna dissatisfy so many people. Like, ignore that shit, and like, yeah, just you don't really need to explain why the villain is evil or anything like that. And also, it can make a story predictable. Like, oh, I see this character mirrors the thing, and this is what the other one's doing. It's not great for every story, I think. Anything else to add?
No, we can move on to the next question.
Okay, so yeah, and the next question is, what is the one thing that many TF create? Oh, sorry, this is by Ski Sharp. My apologies, almost didn't credit the question. What is the one thing that many TF creators do that drive you crazy? Like for me, it's the knee switching direction. Anything like that for you?
Things that drive me crazy. I can't really think of anything because my approach to experiencing people's art is usually just I accept that everybody has their own style and their own approach to things. So if somebody does a thing that I'm not necessarily a fan of, my response is, well, that's kind of like their style, that's kind of like their voice, so why would I be upset for somebody using their voice necessarily? And this is, just to be clear, this is just me when talking about individual creators, not when you have something that's like a larger collaboration of creators. So right. I'm just like talking about like, artists who draw stuff. It's kind of like, when I commission an artist to draw something, I do it with the expectation of you're going to draw it in your style with your sensibilities and your preferences. Obviously I'm going to request what I would like to see, but like, why would I just be disappointed that somebody uses their own voice? So I don't really get that. When I see TF and it's like, oh, this has something I don't like, I'm kind of just, well, I guess maybe I just don't like the artist's style.
Yeah, that's fine. And I think that's pretty healthy in general in terms of not feeling entitled to what people are doing, which, I have also complained a lot about the entitlement of fans, or at least the perceived entitlement. But yeah, I think that's a fine answer. So yeah, if you don't have one, like, aside from that, I think that's good because it also shows that you recognize what you just don't want. But I guess nothing drives you crazy. That's nice. Me, I'm unfortunately a less good person, I guess, because there are two things that come to mind, and I'm going to give them both to you. One is whenever gender is changed, it would involve like the the lengthening of hair. Changing your sex does not lengthen your fucking hair. It just, like, that is like, and it fucks me up because some of these things have a bit like a scientific bent, like they'll take an injection or something like that, and their hair will fucking grow more on their head. Get out of here, man. I think that if you're going to have hair growth on the head, you might as well have hair growth everywhere else. And guess what? Female human beings, cis females, they all have hair, like, everywhere. So I better see a lot more going on. Like, don't give me the fucking science angle and then say, oh yeah, their hair gets long. Fuck you. I hate that.
I think that's actually funny, because now that you've said that, because I've never thought about it, now you say that, whenever I see, like a gender-focused TF, I'm gonna think about, like, oh, is the hair lengthening or not? Which is not a bad thing. I just think it's like it's funny because I never thought about it.
It's just like, I have long hair. Does that mean I'm one step TG? Like, get the fuck out of here. It's so weird, and it just asserts that yes, women equal long hair. That's so that's it's regressive. It's regressive, and that kind of bothers me because. Go ahead.
No, I think what I think is very interesting about this topic is I view a lot of gender TF as, like, at least for a lot of people that I have seen take it, as a lot of like gender affirming stuff for them, because like when they take commission art of their Sona going through a gender TF or something like that, I feel like a lot of the motivation is that they also want to like have something that's affirming of them. But it's all very interesting about hair, because really nothing's preventing you from having long hair IRL if you really want, unless you're like really in a society where that's like unacceptable. But obviously you're not going to be turned into a wolf with long hair, but you can still have the long hair part if you want, like that part. gender affirming. So I just think it's like a very interesting topic. I don't really have like a conclusion to it. It's just like very interesting to me to think about it.
Look, it's a gray zone, and I understand, especially since gender is a performance, and people can argue with me successfully that if they want to include long hair as part of the gender expression, that is valid. And yes, it is, but also it seems to be a thing that just sort of happens, and I feel like people ought to think about that a little bit more. If my body were completely swapped, all right, way into the other part of the binary, is my hair going to get shorter because it's the opposite? No. Like, and already I grow my nails fairly long. I can paint them and have nice nails. I've had other people tell me I have nice nails. That doesn't make me effeminate, does it? Although one could argue again, gender expression, blah, blah, blah. It is a complicated thing. But just keeping it to why it bothers me is because if you woman, you get long hair, and I feel that it's really fucking dumb. Just leave them the fuck be that way. Also, there's just other things that come along with like the perceived, big fucking bold letters, perceived, secondary sex characteristics that they think women are supposed to have, like long nails, like big puffy cocksucker lips, and the thing that makes me fucking crazy, that if you change your gender, you will automatically be really, really incensed to want to fuck the opposite sex. Like, suddenly you gotta have it. You gotta fucking have it. And listen, man, I've searched the internet to try to find things that I really like, and I know that now there is the side with, you know, gender affirmation and exploring oneself and, you know, and telling about, you know, it's deep personal shit. But there's also just like the straight up just sexual side, and it gets like weirdly sexist. Yep. And there is some bleeding into that with like the furry stuff and the TG stuff that we have. Yep. So I think that people ought to look at that critically. That shit drives me fucking insane when a TF artist does that. Honorable mention to what I like to call the thing with the fingers. That being, and you're going to be able to see this, it's when people take these two fingers and they have like a very expressive hand pose, but these two fingers have to be together. As if they don't want to go through the trouble of doing each finger in their own pose, because it like saves time. In a transformation, it bothers me especially because when your hands are like curling and tensing and all this other kind of stuff, especially since one of the coolest things you can see in some of the better scenes in movies is when you see the hands just kind of go like weird, you know? And you keep those two fingers together, and I don't fucking believe you. I can tell you were lazy. I'm sorry, I have to call you lazy. and you fucking did it, and if you did this for yourself, please just do it. I do it. Do it. Okay, yeah, those are my two things. I hope people are satisfied.
I thought the answer was good. I actually really like both answers, because now those are all things that I'm gonna be like looking out for when I'm looking at TFR.
Dude, the TFR thing is like, yeah, you'll be able to just pick your perspective on it based on the tone or whatever. Again, that's very situational. I am not trying to flatten all the TG stuff into sexist tropes. Please know that. But seriously, the thing with the fingers, I have seen like very professional, high-level motherfucking artists that I wish I could do what they do, and they will stick those two fucking things together, and I will be like, come on, man, you got everything else down so fucking well. Make it look believable, please.
So for those who don't see the cam, this is basically the middle finger and the ring finger. Those are the ones that are the offenders.
In fact, I will go out of my way to just put an example up, and I'm sorry to whatever artist that may notice it. It may or may not be a TF artist I'm going to find, but I'm going to show you, and And once you are aware that artists do that, you will see it everywhere, even in animation. Animation is one of the places that I give it some slack because you're animating, but it's there. In fact, I'll give you one last egregious example of it. In Overwatch, in Moira's 3D model, with her like posing, for fucking whatever reason, they didn't want to separate the fingers. so it looks weird. Stop it! You could just be like, that's it.
See, I was a Symmetra main, and her fingers were separate.
Oh, well then, I gotta look at like her other. Fuck this shit. Anyway, it's not about this. Thank you very much for the questions. Enbyeon, I don't know if you have a question for me or in general.
No. I thank you for having me here. It was really fun time talking about video games and taking viewer questions.
Oh, right, man. Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed having this chat with you. Also, please, your socials, anything that you may want people to find you or of you or about you.
Sure. So I am on Blue Sky. You can find me there on enbyeon.bluesky.social. So that's ENBYEON. You can also follow me on twitch.tv where it's Enbyeon _. So basically the same, but just with the underscore at the end. Yeah, I do streams roughly 4 times a week. I do have a TF redeem as well. People can throw potions at me and then it changes my VTuber rig, so you can have fun with that. But yeah, other than that, that's about the only 2 things I have to plug.
All right. Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you again for coming on. This has been a great time for me. I hope that anybody who listens has really enjoyed themselves. We will be seeing you next week when Zill will be returning. Until then, please keep that open mind. Watch out for fingers being stuck together that are not supposed to be in like expressive hand poses. And do not fear the darkness because, I mean, night falls every night. It's fine. It's pretty natural. See you later, everybody.
Bye-bye.